I would now request Professor Dr. Stephen P. Marks, Francois Xavier Begnot Professor of Health and Human Rights, Harvard University, and Professor Jindal Global Law School to share his comments on the report.
Good morning, and thank you very much. Obviously, you saw me arrive late. I want to apologize profoundly for that, and especially since one of my goals in life, one of my lessons in life, is never to speak after the speaker who just addressed you. It is absolutely impossible. It'll take now all of us probably most of our lifetimes and beyond to absorb the totality of the wisdom that you've just heard. I am here speaking on diversity, of course, and need to issue the disclaimer that the voice of diversity is best expressed by people who have been victims of exclusion. And in my life, I have had the privilege, often called white privilege, of not suffering from those forms of exclusion. But I have developed early on in my career a commitment to the values that underlie this report and underlie the wisdom that was just expressed by Shiv. My field, as you know, is human rights, and the issue of diversity and inclusion is reflected from the human rights perspective in the deep ambiguity of the values of equality, equity, and inclusion, and the reality of deeply rooted inequality, injustice, and exclusions. The positivist and utilitarian philosopher Jeremy Bentham famously proclaimed in Anarchical Fallacies that natural rights, and in particular, the claim of the French Declaration on the Rights of Man and the Citizen that, quote, all men are created equal, and he said all people, but in the language of the time, all men are created equal in rights, is nonsense. Bentham asks, the rights of the heir of the most indigent family equal to the rights of the heir of the most wealthy? In what case is this true? He considered equality, like the other natural rights in the French Declaration, to be rhetorical nonsense, nonsense upon stilts. And if that was not enough, he also referred to the formulation of these rights as mischievous nonsense, dangerous nonsense, miserable nonsense, rueful nonsense, and even referred to the use of terrorist language in the Declaration. So think for a minute of the affirmation that all people are created equal in dignity and rights. Human rights is based on that premise. And Bentham said, hang on a minute, it's not true. So, to what extent is this true for the proclamation of the values of building a diverse, equitable, and global university in this report? The reality of society is that people are born into wealth and poverty and caste, and to claim that they are born equal is not a sociological observation, but an aspirational statement, acknowledging that discrimination and exclusion are deeply embedded social institutions which we are committed to ending. To overcome the reality of inequality at birth and achieve the aspirations of diversity and inclusion, at least three institutions are crucial. Democratic governance, and I take to heart the point that the Indian Constitution requires a tacit constitution to adequately address the issues of inclusion. Social policies designed to improve socioeconomic status so the vast inequalities can be bridged. And equal access to quality education, which is what this report is all about. So to get to the topic of building a diverse, equitable, and global university, it is undeniable that universities have been, and still are, a principal institution for the replication of the dominating classes, to borrow an expression from the Marxist analysis of the role of the universities in society. But it's quite true. Just hearing that expression is enough to communicate its meaning. Universities are tools for the replication of the dominating classes. JGU's relentless commitment to world-class excellence and its success in achieving that goal in 10 short years will be recorded in the annals of higher education as unparalleled. However, achieving excellence in higher education results in establishing an elite institution, which attracts those with the resources to aspire to benefit from its greatness. Universities have made great strides in breaking out of that expectation that those who control the political economy and benefit from the acquisition of considerable assets by whatever means will use the system of higher education to perpetuate that privilege, while those of the wrong class, caste, race, socioeconomic status will find themselves excluded. That is a core problem that this report is addressing. The current scandal in the United States over bribes by rich families to get their children into the best schools is a telling tale about how far we have gone to overcome that pattern and privilege. My own alma mater had to fire the head sailing coach, and the president and provost stated, "The conduct reported in this case is absolutely contrary to Stanford's values and to the norms this university has lived by for decades. Today's news is a shock exactly because it so clearly violates our institutional expectations for ethical conduct." So, yes, the president and provost are talking about the values that they think the university represents. But the fact of this scandal of briberies to get into these institutions reflects that the universities still are those institutions where the dominating classes seek to perpetuate their privileges. So even with criminal sanctions for those who fraudulently facilitated entry into universities by the side door, bribes, we still have much to do to address the issues of exclusion that result from entry from the back door. That is, legacies and large donations that create an incentive to give preferential treatment to the children of those who make those donations. And the tough questions of financial and cultural barriers to benefit fully from the merit-based front door. All this confirms the hold the financial elites have on access to elite higher education. So turning to diversity, the president of the university that I'm now affiliated with, Drew Faust, created in 2016 a presidential task force on inclusion and belonging. And she stated in launching this, for nearly 400 years, Harvard has steadily, though often painfully slowly, opened its doors, and it has welcomed groups previously excluded from its faculty, staff, and student body. But as recent events, both here and elsewhere, have reminded us, she said, much work remains to be done if we are to fulfill our ideals and if we are to succeed in educating leaders and scholars who can effectively contribute to a complex and too often fractured world. The report of that task force, called Pursuing Excellence on a Foundation of Inclusion, provided in 38 pages plus annexes the data on women, minorities, and international student, staff, and faculty, and proposed a framework of 4 goals and 4 tools as a guide to strategic innovation on behalf of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I won't go into that report since my purpose is to comment on JGU's report, which is 56 pages long, plus annexes, and identifies 16 indicators of diversity and inclusion based on the core values of promoting pluralism and celebrating diversity. Those 16 indicators, which you can see on page 14, reflect the broadest interpretation of diversity that I know. So this institution produced a report that is longer than Harvard's report, that contains more indicators than Harvard's report, but that's not the core of the issue. I would attach special importance to this statement included in this report that, quote, gender parity and equity is a central goal for JGU. Equally noteworthy is the frank acknowledgement that, historically, religion and caste have been key lines of exclusion for participation in work and education in India. To the credit of the authors of this report, the report admits the difficulty of collecting data relating to religion and caste of students and staff and expresses its commitment in JGU's strategic vision of 2029 to, quote, increase representation of students and employees from all religions and caste backgrounds, with particular focus on underrepresented communities and population groups that have been historically disadvantaged socially, economically, and politically. The report enumerates 5 steps to keep that commitment by 2019. Now, we all know that despite the Constitution, whether it's the Constitution of 1947 or the tacit one that was proposed earlier, India has a long way to go to achieve that goal of inclusion, regardless of caste and religion. I also warmly welcome in this report the commitment to enhancing institutional support for students and staff with various types of disability, and to sensitize staff members and employees on issues relating to our diversity and inclusion vision. On this topic, the report lists 10 concrete steps to take over the next 10 years to advance support for differently enabled students and staff. The commitment to interdisciplinarity, innovative pedagogy, and international collaboration further advances an inspiring vision of diversity. It is deeply encouraging to read, quote, we want to encourage our students to cultivate a deep and respectful understanding for diversity and plurality, to award need-based scholarship to eligible students coming from socially and economically disadvantaged backgrounds, to continue strengthening institutional consciousness of issues relating to gender identity and sexuality, and to engage closely with neighboring communities, formally and informally, through individual, group, and institutional level contact based on trust and shared objectives. I have no doubt that those critical components of this wide-ranging pledge to genuine diversity and inclusion have set JGU on a path to making high-quality education truly inclusive. We're all pleased that JGU is an elite institution. These accomplishments over the last 10 years are truly phenomenal. And even more pleased that it has embraced an understanding of and commitment to diversity and inclusion in the hope that it will contribute to liberating higher education from the stereotype of being a replicator of privilege and domination, and setting it on the path to providing the highest quality of education across class, caste, gender, and other grounds of exclusion. I look forward to learning from the stellar panel speakers and congratulate the university on this report, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you very much for sharing your comments, sir. May I now request our chief guest, Professor Dr. Virender S. Chauhan, Chairman, NAC, to deliver the inaugural address.
Good morning. Raj doesn't strike early in the morning only, he strikes late in the night also. I get a phone call almost 11 with finishing alcoholic holy dinner last night. And I get a phone call from him only to remind me that I have to be here in the morning. So Raj can strike any time. Raj, when calls at odd moments, I'm always scared to receive his phone call because there'll be a new idea. The only thing is the next new idea is always seems to be better than the previous idea. So yeah, I've done a lot of things which are incorrect. I've done a lot of things which haven't worked very well. But selection of Raj as a Rhodes Scholar did go very well. So that's the evidence. About diversity, inclusiveness, much has been said, and good thing to talk after Shiv Vishwanathan is precisely this, then you don't have to display your ignorance about the subject. But diversity is essential. You celebrate it, you don't celebrate it, you desire it, don't desire it. We won't be here if nature or evolution did not take diversity. The whole basis of evolution is diversity. So I don't think we need to speak much more. It's essential. The bugs which are diverse in nature are hardier, they live longer, they live better. The drugs which control bugs which work through diverse mechanism work better. Otherwise, bugs get resistance to them. So diversity is displayed everywhere. In fact, DNA is made in such a way, DNA itself, which is the thread of life in all living, all biological system, all living system. I think its own evolution itself lends to diversity. Diversity of proteins can be expressed and so on. So this is by nature of, so I think we can celebrate it. But my thesis is absolutely essential, you cannot do. Whenever there's a diversity which is compromised, all system, no matter whether it's crops or weeds or bugs or humans, there's a danger of that biological system declining, and we are all biological systems. I'm going to try to bring diversity and inclusiveness back into the higher education boundary. So those of you who are now in your 30s may not even realize, unless you make an attempt to really read it. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes trying to tell you of the complexity of a system, and much you want to celebrate diversity, protect it in education. I'll just keep it in education, but having said that, diversity is essential in every part of life, whether it's language, culture, music, whatever. So that point is rested. So time of independence, I think the numbers are essential to absorb. There were 120,000 students only in all our university. That's the number in higher education at that time. Only 12% were women, rest were all males. And so you can imagine, today if you come to 2018 figure, not 19, I think 17, 18, 120,000 women students graduated from one single state which is not considered very good in education, state of Bihar. 120,000 women graduated in one single year in Bihar. And so on and so forth. I can flash a lot of numbers. So the education system grew very fast from almost nothing. I was 120,000 students in higher education for a population of 355 million is really nothing. And steady growth. I'll save you the details, but if we go forward into 2005, there seems to be an explosion. There was a steady increase, and we are trying to cope with it. UGC got started in 1962, 63, started functioning properly at the end of 60s. So you can imagine there's a vacuum for 20 years, first 20 years. The system grew extremely fast, but 2005, 2006, 2004, a special time. This is when, from no state private university, zero in this country, in 10 years' time, there were almost 250 state private universities. And let me bring again diversity question back into higher education. The Indian education, higher education itself is so diverse that it becomes confusing sometimes. And you start wondering here that the diversity need to be protected or nurtured or not. The case in point is this. You have 5, 6 different kinds of universities in India. And I'll come to something which I feel very toxic happened to Indian higher education a little bit later. But there were 20 central universities in 2005, 2006. There are 47 central universities run by central government by 2015, 2016. More than double, almost triple number of universities expanded in public sector run by the central government. But in India, it's not only central government. It is state government. In fact, most of the Prime Minister Modi in Punjab in January, for the first time any prime minister or anyone senior enough made a statement to say that the higher education in India, the brunt is borne by state university. I'm talking of the public funded university. So from 215 state university, which exists in 2005, there's expansion to about 350 in 10 years. So there's a massive explosion. I already said about the private investment, zero private university to almost 350 today. So there is a huge entropy which is happening in, and with this huge entropy, of course, there's a diversity. There are small universities, there are big university, they are focus university. And what I think now, dealing with the possibility of regulating this cosmic mass of, but let me just get that out. Now there's special university to teach you yoga. There are special university being open to teach you single language. There's one just next door to you, 50 yards from here, teaches only one single language. So while celebration of diversity is essential, talk of it is absolutely necessary, but this is at the same time, and I dare say, there's hardly anybody who doesn't realize, recognizes. But this is where the post-2007, 2008 trends have moved into. And that's not the current discussion, so we can take it up just another time. What happened in 2007, 2008, or 2006, when the government funding all over the world reduced dramatically, and a different kind of higher education is evolved. It's not even, it'll take a long time to have a special discussion about, which follows with the ranking of university, follows with the tensions of where should you publish, rogue journals. And so the word of higher education, with or without diversity, becoming far too complex to handle. So there are universities in India called national universities of national importance, as if rest of the university are not important. So there are 110 universities of national importance. Now, if you're a regulator or trying to make sense of this diversity in higher education, as a regulator, you're still looking at whole mass as one homogeneous mass. So trying to bring homogeneity by the way of either national assessment accreditation policies, or their templates, or their matrices, or by the way of any other measure. If you want, by the way of funding, by the way of regulation, by the way of governance, can you look at this huge heterogeneity? You can call it diversity if you like, but I call it huge heterogeneity into a homogeneous prism. Can you look through? And I can assure you, I've spent 6-7 years of my life dealing with this, with a whole lot of others, including Raj. And it is not an easy system. But let me turn my attention for a minute, because last time we also talked about internationalization, and therefore, because the last part of this report is creation of a truly global university. And it's a sense one gets from the book that the diversity, inclusiveness is essential feature for global university, and I won't argue with that. I think that's in right place. But global university, so I also sat through something called, in India, I'm sure you know, Institution of Eminence, or making Indian university competitive on an international scale, as it were. Because ranking was beginning to wrinkle in our heads, we should be ranked here or there. We're still, the voices haven't died down very much. It's a favorite subject with Raj also. So, trying to deal with this, when we met with the cabinet, and I'm giving you personal experiences to deal with complexity of diversity and inclusiveness. So one of the mention was that the universities which will be graded above a certain norm, let's say, imagine 30 universities in the country are qualifying to become, they're funded more, etc. So 25% of their seats can be given to foreign students. And that came from because of your ranking, this is a metrics, it's a good idea to have international diversity, interfaculty, and so on. And I think we were very comfortable with this. We go in front of these ministers and we were ripped apart. All our arguments were ripped apart, that you have, your GER is just 24. Any decent country you want to compare yourself would have a GER of 80, 90, you know, gross enrollment ratios. We are still struggling in low 20s. 2005, we were only 11. GR in 2005 is only 11. If all of you look at the UGC report which has come out, where we were to where we are, if you were to make it to 50 or to 60, your diversity will, in the kind of university itself, will explode. And so they immediately, so this tension, but we are now, on the other hand, looking at how are we globally competitive? You can't knock off this metrics off the board. So it took us 6 months to deal with Prime Minister office, to the cabinet, and what arguments, I will not name the ministers, were making, were absolutely spot on. They were looking at people who haven't have received education forever, for 5,000 years, who had not been educated in a university. So accessing, so if you look at the UGC initial motto, which hasn't changed till today, is access is the first, then equity. I don't even talk about excellence anymore. I think we are, personally, from where I see NAC or UGC or HIFA or MHRD, I think we are still very much stuck in the beginning of accessing with equity. So it's nothing to do with private. Raj will bear me out. I don't think there's anything called private university, government university. I think all universities are universities. I want to put one more tension, which I want to share with you, because all of you are serious students or followers of this. I recall Madhav Menon, who maybe Raj, he taught you. If not taught you, he would have just left. Madhav Menon was a faculty at Delhi University. Delhi University is an extremely good university. It's one of the best universities that I know. I've come from a poor family. And I went to a government institution. If Delhi University wasn't there, I wouldn't have been educated. This is absolutely true. Because we paid next to nothing, had some of the best teachers, best physicists, best chemists. So those structures were absolutely essential at the time that they were needed. And I dare say they're needed now. So more than half of my 65 PhD students who worked with me actually are the first time education in their family. They all have come from 50%, at least 50% of my student parents or grandparents have never been to the university. So so we are still in India to my mind, from where I see. But at the same time, there's a tension that you need to bring homogeneous regulatory mechanism for an extremely heterogeneous mass. And I find it's very, very difficult. So I was personally involved in restructuring the national assessment accreditation. The work is nowhere near complete. I find it messy. So I also headed a committee called Seventh Pay Commission. The government has always made me the chairman, which allowed me to visit all over the country and actually physically interact with people. We had about 15 meetings with vice chancellor, college teachers. So I'll give you a snapshot. I won't name the state. So the colleges, today as I speak with you, where there has been no single hiring of faculty for past 8 years. And this is a whiff of diversity to you. The rules and regulation of state university, and we have 350 of them, is a state service. So unless the state structure, that is bureaucracy of the structure, would choose who will come and teach in your university for 7 years, not a single. I went to a convocation address in a decent university, well-known university called University of Bhopal, only a couple of weeks back. So here's the diversity for you. So there are 350 faculty positions, sanctioned by the state government, and they have 59 on their rolls. They have 62 departments managed by 59 full-time faculty. It's a decent university. They have about 10,000 students. Reason? Because state government has to give them permission to start employing people. Forget about state university, because we can malign state universities. Central universities. Central university haven't had the ability to hire any faculty whatsoever, and including JNUs and BHUs and Delhi University, your best university, and I consider Delhi University one of the best universities, haven't had a single hiring at the faculty level for the past almost 2 years. And they have as many as 3,000 vacancies. Is inclusiveness is a problem? Is diversity is a problem? And since you know about this, these problems have emerged. And they have emerged from business of inclusiveness. I have no comment to make, no side to take, whether this is right or that is right. But I'm talking about the consequences of celebrating or having presence of, or having tensions of historical legacies that we have to simply go through. So I for one do not panic on this. It is something that we just have to go through this. Excellence is a good idea, ranking may be a good idea, and I personally don't have much time for it, because I see very closely where the tensions are. And tensions for a long time would be accessing with equity, and that cannot be wished away. And many others. So for the language, for example, I go for this convocation. I'm given a SAFA. This is the present, this 2019 we are talking about. And governor is with us, so is the vice chancellor. And there are a whole lot of parents and relatives from all kinds. And everything is done in Hindi, the language. Fortunately, I speak very well, so I could give my convocation address. But I clearly see 20% of people sitting in front of me could not make a head and tail of what I was saying or what the governor is saying. Essential part of diversity, inclusiveness, these are tribal areas, a lot of tribal parents are there. But once again, as I said, I look at this complexity with a great fascination. From a country which had 120,000 students in higher education in 1950 to 3.6 crore, that is 36 million people in higher education, and we're still counting. I hope I'm not going to be chairing either UGC nor NAC should our GER increase from 24, 25 to 50. It will be a huge cosmic system. Maybe different ways of handling will have to meet up with diversity. 6 kind of university, 16 languages. And as I speak with you, we are opening a new university, Mono University. Let me spend that Madhav Menon story. So when Madhav Menon was asked that Delhi University is becoming very big and law faculty, what can you do with the law faculty? He simply said to the Vice Chancellor, Ken Raj at that time, thank you very much. Nothing can be done to Delhi University. It's too large. You have AC with 150 people, we'll never get anything whole night. That narration is absolutely true. So what should we do? So Madhav said that if you want to do great law university, I'll take responsibility, and he started National Law School in Bangalore. So soon after, there was Hyderabad School, Nalsar, Mono University, and if you see in my narratism toxicity coming, I'm deeply against creation of Mono University. I'm very happy, Raj, that you're no longer college. You have law, you have governance, you have this structure, you have sustenance, you have design, you'll have all that. But there are a lot of universities which are celebrated in India are mono universities. And this business of diversity will probably pass them then so here. So we have now we have almost 20 national law schools. And all of them call themselves 26 now, university, and we're still counting. So even IITs, the the famous prize, the holy cows, you can't challenge them. I taught in one of the IIT, I taught in IIT Kanpur. Really run through narrow, there's hardly any notion of diversity there. With engineering, plays great kids, very good kids go to these universities, you produce them very smart. Every third person in Silicon Valley is from IIT and IITs in India, and that was the same for IIMs. The temples of management in India, mono university. So I'm dealing with some of the IIM's new Indian Institute of Management, and so I'm arguing with them and in HIFA. Why can't a management institute to start having courses, basic courses in economics, financial mathematics, and so on? And what we've done so far has not been very successful. So while we can, in that sense, what you are trying to do at Jindal University is outstanding. And I agree with Shiv. I think this should be spread. There should be, whichever way you do, this is what needs to be understood in IITs, IIMs, OSIIRs. Now there are 7 OSIIRs. Each OSIIR teaches only 2,000 students. It's an extremely expensive proposition. But you will not find a historian or political scientist or a philosopher in any of these institutes that I mentioned. And I find the future of university has to be the way you're going. You have to have diversity in your faculty, in the subjects that you teach. So if you look at what people who were the fathers, as it were, of modern idea of university, Newman in, not Paul Newman, John Newman in Oxford, and Humboldt started Berlin University. One of the basic 3 pillars, one of the pillars was the diversity, that people should come to you from all walks of life. If you read what Newman has written, I just quote from my memory, if they should come to all walks of life, you should learn as much in the class as outside the class, and you should be able to interact in the evening, either in junior common room or senior common room or on sports field or wherever in a university, which allows you to meet with different ideas, allows you to debate, allows you to accept somebody else's ideas, and so on. And personally, I think this mono university, they produce very good students, and nothing against Bangalore or Nalsar or Raipur or Jodhpur or so on and so forth. But I just wonder if that is the education. I personally, I'm very clear about I think not. And the future of university, in my heart, in my sense, will always be a comprehensive university where you have huge diversity of students, of faculty, of subjects you teach, research you do. It is essential for its survival. My last comment would be the challenge of NAC to deal with the so-called diversity. The National Assessment Accreditation, for various reasons, have been overhauled. So that when the benchmarking is to be done, for example, you want to rate, first of all, I personally think we should not be rating any university. I'm dead against A is better than B and B better than C. You do a good job and thank you very much. But nonetheless, the government went a step further, much against our argument. My arguments are usually not successful, I'm a lone voice, is to tie up a certain score with the notion of your grade 1 or grade 2. I think something extremely toxic, but that has happened. So we just have to live with for a while. Now, when you benchmark, let's say, inclusiveness, or let's say any of these 16 notions of diversity, so you make a matrix, and then you benchmark. If you're this, we give you 4 marks. If you're this, we give you 3 marks, 2 marks, and finally we end up all these marks. So when we try to do this, so you have this. Law schools say differently. We have medical university, standalone medical university, standalone law university, standalone architecture university, standalone huge kind of university. So everything, lots of standalone business. So the idea of diversity is royally being massacred in our vision of higher education on daily basis. So anyway, that's let me not go that direction. So when you benchmarking the I call diversity heterogeneity, is so difficult to handle. Where do you go outside to help a villager or not? Should that be inclusiveness? How many students you take from caste, and especially the university which are funded privately. I don't call them private university, funded by private sources. This tension is even bigger, and each one wants to be better than others. So right now, as I speak with, in fact, just after this meeting, we're dealing with some of our benchmarks have to change, because this notion of diversity, you have to deal with people who, okay, this last example. Since we don't trust our academic institution for the information, mind you, we are a very young system, so there are a lot of trust and distrust is going to happen. Currently what we do, we get information from Jindal School or whoever, Delhi University, and we don't trust what you've given is correct. A lot of it is, fortunately, is testable from the internet, but a lot of it is not. So my colleagues in NAC are very hostile. And they have actually, I'm much more trusting. I think, why should university tell us a lie about what you publish, but they don't trust. So something called geotagging, that if you have a laboratory, if you have a deep university somewhere in Northeast, Mizoram or Arunachal, hard to reach, they say we have 20 labs, but how do you know they have 20 labs? So okay, you geotag. So I went to give us about a month back, talked in Bihar. The governor had called me to tell everybody how NAC works. So I said, very sheepishly, I said, perhaps you can geotag. So one of the principal got up and said, so, but we don't have geo network. So I'm telling you, this is the diversity. This is celebration. So 2-3 came said, but we don't have geo yet. We can have Airtel or something. But that's your client. I mean, you can't ignore. It actually does sound funny, but it's very sad also. But they are teaching, they are still producing, they are looking at a lot of people who parents and mothers and fathers and grandmothers have never been to school or education, haven't seen a train in their life. I have a student whose parents came for the first time, they'd never seen a train. They lived in Bengal. So whenever we look at this high end or the lower end, which must be looked at, I'm making no case that we should not. I'm making no case that we should not talk about excellence. That will be stupid, that will be wrong. I think we should put a lot of emphasis on excellence. But we must really come down and see there's a huge problem of access with equity. So I think I can go on forever, Raj. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, sir. I would now request our guest of honor, Honorable Justice Sabrina S. McKenna, Judge, Supreme Court of Hawaii, USA, to kindly deliver the special address.
Aloha. I'd like to congratulate JGU on 10 years, and I'd also like to thank you for making diversity a priority. Before I became a judge 26 years ago, I was a full-time assistant professor at the University of Hawaii William S. Richardson School of Law, and I'm very interested in diversity issues. Why does diversity matter? We've heard a lot about that today. Our differences give us unique perspectives. It enriches the learning environment. It allows us to learn about each other. Increased diversity empowers people of minority backgrounds to feel more comfortable to provide their own perspectives. And studies actually show that students work better in a diverse environment. Having people of diverse backgrounds in an educational setting actually pushes them to work harder and do better. Diverse viewpoints can also collaborate to come up with better solutions for society's problems. Diversity in faculty and staff also matters. It allows students to identify with the faculty and staff and provides them with role models and different perspectives. I attended the University of Hawaii at Manoa in Honolulu, Hawaii, which is one of the 50 states, the 50th state, and for undergraduate school and law school. I moved to Hawaii. I'm the daughter of an American father and a Japanese mother. I grew up in Japan and the Philippines, and I moved to Hawaii to attend the University of Hawaii. So in my family, my father was basically Christian. My mother was Buddhist and Shinto, as most Japanese are. So I grew up honoring all three traditions. When I was in my first year of college, my first roommates in college were two Malaysian Muslims and an African American woman from California. I learned a lot by rooming with these women. I'm so glad I had this experience, especially with the issues that America faces now. You know, I've reviewed the report, and I'm so impressed with the way you break down so many different diversity categories, not just among students, but faculty and staff also. Your diversity report includes categories that I don't see in US reports. But it really piqued my curiosity about what was happening at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, my alma mater. So I actually took a look. And by the way, University of Hawaii at Manoa is one of, we shouldn't care about rankings. I absolutely agree. I don't think rankings should matter in terms of where people are best equipped to learn and should be exposed to education. But it happens to be one of the 183 top 1,000 world universities. And you know, I've mentioned that Hawaii is one of the 50 states in the United States. And I want you to understand that under the federal system of government, federal law sets minimum requirements in various categories, and states can provide greater protections in various categories. Hawaii law requires students to attend school at least 12 years or until age 18, and provides a free and adequate public education for all students. In terms of statistics, UH provides statistics for faculty and students in some categories, but definitely not staff. We don't have any staff statistics. Hawaii happens to be the most ethnically diverse state in the country. 77% of Hawaii is non-Caucasian. We are the only majority minority state. 83% of the students at the University of Hawaii are not Caucasian, but only 47% of our faculty are non-Caucasian. You know, especially as a woman, I'm so impressed that JGU students, 46% are women, and 49% of JGU's faculty are women, which I understand well exceeds India's average. Hawaii's population is 49% female. 55% of the University of Hawaii students are female. 52% of our faculty are female. And it's higher than the 49% of female faculty amongst United States universities. You know, in recent history, you may know that over 50% of all American university graduates are women in recent history. And degree recipients also, undergraduate and graduate degrees, but not in the STEM fields. That's the reality. But this increase in women students and faculties is a direct result, I believe, of a law that was passed in 1972, which we called Title IX. And it was Title IX of the 1972 Educational Amendments. And this law prevents gender discrimination in any educational institution, primary, secondary, or university, from any institution that's receiving federal funds. For example, in 1970, only 8.2% of women in the United States had a bachelor's degree. 1970. 2017, that has risen to 35% of all women in the United States have a bachelor's degree. I think you might be really interested to know, I thought this was very interesting, that the number is actually much higher for Asian Americans. 54% of Asian American women in the United States have a bachelor's degree. 57% of all Asian Americans in the United States have a bachelor's degree. I happen to be the first open member of the LGBT community to serve, that is an Asian American, to serve on this state court of last resort, on a state Supreme Court. And I'm so glad that you are really championing LGBTQ diversity also. I know that you can't have figures right now because it was only September of 2018 that India's Supreme Court finally said that Section 377 was unconstitutional. So who in the world before that is going to identify themselves unless you have a lot of courage and are willing to take the risk of being fired or whatever might happen? That would never happen at JGU, I know that. But I'm really appreciative of the inclusive environment that you have created for the LGBTQ community and for the scholarship and the leadership of the JGU faculty that were cited in the judgment of the India Supreme Court. Okay, so United States federal law does not currently protect, it protects against discrimination based on gender. I told you about Title IX. It also protects based on educational discrimination on national origin, disability, and age. And under President Barack Obama, they had interpreted gender discrimination to include sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination, but the Trump administration has rescinded that. And has left it up to the 50 states to protect on those categories. Hawaii happens to be one of only 15 states that prevents discrimination by educational institutions that receive state funds based on sexual orientation and gender identity. In addition to those categories, Hawaii state law, in addition to the categories of gender, national origin, and age protected by federal law, Hawaii state law also specifically prohibits discrimination on educational institutions on race, skin color, limited English proficiency, people that speak other languages, and religion. Now, turning back to your report, I'm really glad that you provide scholarships to so many of your students. The only report that I was able to see is the number of students in Hawaii UH that receive Pell Grants, which are grants from the federal government for students, needy students, and that's 31%. And I think there are a lot more scholarships that are provided not necessarily to needy students. And in terms of international students, we don't have the percentage of faculty. We do have 6% international students at the University of Hawaii, and I was lucky to be surrounded by international students as I was a student. So in conclusion, I thank you so much for your commitment to diversity. I'm so honored to be able to be an honorary adjunct faculty member of JGU Law School, and I believe that in terms of this report, we have much to learn in the United States and Hawaii. Mahalo. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind address, ma'am. May I now request our other guest of honor, Honorable Justice Michael D. Wilson, Judge, Supreme Court of Hawaii, to kindly deliver this special address.
Yes, you have to adjust it for the vertically challenged. Thank you. My goodness, this is a real privilege to be here. Let me start by saying what always makes us feel comfortable from Hawaii when we speak, as my great colleague mentioned, the concept of aloha. So aloha to you, which is sort of our version of namaste. And it is so appropriate for the concept of diversity. We have such a bond with India when we come here from Hawaii. And I'm going to speak a bit about a bond that's sort of an existential one. At this point, I would submit to ask for your help because, you know, this global university is so aspirational, it's so extraordinary because it isn't just trying to provide a job. It's trying to provide concepts of fairness that aren't just national. It's an ethical dimension that stretches to being international. So ambitious. So thank you for that from the point of view of Hawaii, because we have an international position of great consequence, because I think it's fair to say in the collective human consciousness, we are probably the ideal concept of an environment. So that brings me to this collaboration. It's such a existentially significant one between Jindal Global Law School, our law school, and our court, because our court, like all courts, deals with diversity in a way that has as a defining principle a kind of discipline that makes it a little bit less of a comfortable discussion. Because when I listen to Shiv, it'd be nice if he could just be in charge of the borders between India and Pakistan, or in charge of the concept of justice, because he's flexible and he believes in human nature. And then if he was on the Supreme Court of a country, he'd be restricted, maybe uncomfortable. Because we truth test diversity. We truth test the idea of gender equity, educational equity, natural resource equity, racial equity. So what does that mean these days? And what does it mean for our collaboration with India? You have the victim generation more than any other country with 1.2 billion people. It's not a generation that's really represented here today in terms of individuals in that particular category, which I guess you could call the generation that's headed towards the biggest problem that courts have in the world, and the reason for the development of the Global Judicial Institute on the Environment. What is the biggest problem? The biggest problem is this ability for us to have the luxury of listening to great intellectuals on the concept of diversity, and maybe have the luxury of some well-meaning people that populate courts, hopefully more women as time goes on, hopefully more tribals, hopefully more people who are from disadvantaged backgrounds. But nonetheless, this is a luxury that we have that may not be there in 20 or 30 years, according to, well, for one thing, a justice of the Supreme Court of New South Wales that says in 40 or 50 years, it may be that the rule of law is not really available as much as it's not available as it should be, and in India has made breathtaking steps towards availability on the backs or in the hearts of people like Mahatma Gandhi or Ashoka, or the individuals that put together your great Constitution. It could be seen as a luxury for generations that will be here in 40 or 50 years, because as one of the great scientists and our great professor here, I know we had a little conversation about that, is aware from a scientific point of view that diversity is something that may be just taken over by scientific reality, because as Professor David King says, who has been knighted in part because of his work with COP21 and coming up with the 2-degree limit beyond which we shouldn't go as a world civilization, David King pointed out to a conference that was convened 6 months ago in China by the leadership of the Communist Party, attended by civil society and the intellectual community and judges from all around the world, and he was the lead speaker, and he said, in 40 to 50 years, Bangladesh has to be evacuated at present levels of global warming. So, for us to be in this room in 40 or 50 years would be difficult, because many of us are probably 40 or 50 years old, but for students of Jindal or those advocates of justice that believe that the rule of law is critical to the future of the human race, that would be a challenge maybe in 40 or 50 years to be here when 160 million people leave Bangladesh. I suppose they might have access to some universities in India. I suppose it's possible that you could still have a structural approach to diversity. But my goodness, what a challenge it will be. Brings me back to Jindal Global University. You know, the focus of the diversity of this report is to create nimble students capable of handling changing, fast-changing concepts of economics, fairness, justice. I don't see that at the University of Hawaii in terms of our fundamental mission, whether we're talking about the university or the law school, to create nimble future thinkers that can handle what's coming. But if you think of the acceleration that's taking place now that we are in this room can probably all feel to a certain extent, that acceleration that's going to take the ideal environment on earth that Justice McKenna and I are devoted to under the Constitution of the state of Hawaii that says we're supposed to have a clean and healthy environment, the acceleration that's going to take place means that it will transform it so that our magnificent beaches will in large part disappear. The most important animal in the ocean, coral, will be gone. And when it comes to diversity, the diversity that's likely to happen there is it will have a huge shift at that point in the elite that Professor Marks talked about might be the real focus of most universities, to maintain the privileges of the elite. So global thinking, the thinking that Jindal has, is so extraordinarily hopeful. So let me end on this hopeful concept. Tomorrow I'll be meeting with 6 students that are part of the final stand from your university. 2 of them spoke at an international conference a month ago in Oregon to those people that are part of the final stand, those people that are committed to trying to protect the values that we hold, all of us hold as I guess you could say, signature values for us that have to do with diversity, fairness, justice. And these 2 students that spoke on Skype from Jindal to this gathering of over 3,000 lawyers, judges, and environmental intellectuals said they have to act because whether you're talking about the Prime Minister or you're talking about the legislative branch, they have to act because it's become clear since 2015, again, that we're on a path that means the Earth is going to heat way up above 2 degrees. There's going to be a destabilization for their generation, and they're going to act. And they're going to act by creating, if you will, a kind of concept of diversity that deals with future generations, an identification that future generations are going to move forward. And in so doing, they'll represent the best of Jindal Global University, the best of the vision that the avatar of justice, and I guess you could say global justice, my inspiring brother Raj Kumar, the concept that binds us all together. Because globally we can make a difference, but it does mean that we have to have diversity with future generations, and that generation needs the training to be nimble, and that's very much what this report's about. But you will be protecting us. We're little. You have as many lawyers in India as we have citizens of the state of Hawaii. So the idea of achieving justice might be a more powerful one in India because you have so many agents. And now the idea of justice is being led by Jindal Global University. But if you can help us, then we'll be able to have beaches. If you can help us, then we'll have something that's the core of our culture, which has to do with the ocean and the forest. But we'll also have a diversity that allows us to have a sense, I hope, in the future of what diversity is about. Because what is it about? Is it about loving your families? Is it about not being in fear? Is it about the idea that you've got enough food? Is it about the idea of understanding your relationship with God? Of course, that's what diversity is about. It's not just numbers about how many men, how many women, who's got the best religion, do we have religions represented? It's the value system behind it. And we need India, and we need your leadership, and we thank you. It's great to be here, and I look forward to learning more from many of you, and thank you for what you all stand for. Aloha.
Thank you for your kind words, sir. May I now request Professor Dr. Maushmi Mukherjee, Assistant Professor and Assistant Director, International Institute for Higher Education Research and Capacity Building, to share the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Nandita. Thank you all our panelists. It was a wonderful learning experience, I think, for all of us. And it's a difficult job to summarize the content of all that you have already said. And to draw from our keynote speaker's speech, drawing on our rich legacy here in India, which merges the ethics of memory and ethics of innovation, I would just like to briefly conclude with a quote from Rabindranath Tagore. And this was published in Vishwa Bharati News in January 1934 on the idea of a university. University is there to offer us opportunity for working together in a common pursuit of truth, sharing together our common intellectual heritage to enable us to realize that artists in all parts of the world have created forms of beauty. Scientists discovered secrets of the material universe. Philosophers solved the problems of existence. Saints made spiritual truths organic in their lives, not merely for some particular race to which they belonged, but for all mankind. When we understand this truth in a disinterested spirit, it teaches us to respect all the differences in man that are real, yet remain conscious of our oneness, and to know that perfection of unity is not in uniformity, but in harmony. I think nobody else could have said this as well as Tagore had thought about these issues over a century ago. And if we would talk about the ambition and the vision of a global imagination and university, this is something, a rich legacy that we all inherit here in India, and I hope that we can take this legacy forward. Thank you all, our distinguished panelists, and our Vice Chancellor will now felicitate our panelists.